All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Medicine Mondays. I am here truly, Dr. Pierre, your favorite board certified internist host of Medicine Mondays. This is our weekly show where we either bring special guests or I just get on here to kind of talk about medical leads related topics, as well as Real Physician Reacts. That's our Thursday night show where I just kind of go and give my critique from a physician standpoint on stuff that I see across social media platform. This week is a solo episode. This week, I am going to be talking about how to be dealing with COVID-19 as a family. And this week, I'm going to be talking about from personal experience, right? Like, this isn't like just kind of theory. This is going to be personal experience. What is it like to kind of deal with COVID-19 as a family and navigate, especially when you have little ones who are in school, right? So, I want to kind of give a background story. So I talk about this, right? And I got my little titles, right? So I talk about dealing with the inevitable. And I've kind of said this over the past couple of years. As a physician who not only works in the inpatient sector, taking care of patients in the acute care setting, long-term care setting, rehab setting, like I come across COVID in so many different varieties directly up front, right? The reason why I say that, because obviously I can go to the grocery store, I can go to the gas station, I can go to the school and still deal with COVID, right? But like in the hospital setting, not only do you deal with it in the acute manner, it's personal. Like I know walking in, like, all right, this person has COVID, active COVID, ill from COVID, and I'm here to take care of them. So I've always talked about this past couple of years where as being a doctor in that position, I figured it was just inevitable for me, myself personally, to come down with COVID, right? I just figured that like eventually, even though I'm gowned up, masked up, doing what I can, eventually, because of just my proximity with COVID and especially in the acute related setting, that I was going to come down with it. And the fear that we always have, right, especially a lot of our healthcare professionals, dealing with COVID, is not necessarily that we may come down with COVID, even though, yes, we're afraid of that. It was always that fear that we may come down with COVID or bring it and give it to the rest of our families. That was always a concern of ours. I remember when I first, when COVID first came around, we it got to the point where obviously we didn't know how to deal with COVID. We didn't know how COVID would really spread and whatnot. I used to have to go through the garage, take off almost every single article of clothing, walk to the side, go direct. Like I used to have to do all these almost like decontaminated type processes just to be able to get inside my house, right? Just because of that level of fear, concern of the unknown. And of course, as we fast forward and it's 2+ years, COVID is here. We know that again, we can shop, we could touch plastic bags, we could touch, like we know there's certain things that we could do that we didn't think we could do before. So when we talk about this inevitable as far as COVID is concerned, I just always figured it's inevitable that I likely was either going to come down with it or I was going to come down with it and eventually bring it to my family, right? So I want to talk about what occurred this past week, especially depending on if you're watching this episode the week it drops. So last week, I'll paint the picture. It's almost the end of school. We're getting ready to pick. My wife is actually getting ready to pick our kids up, and then lo and behold, my daughter gets sick. Right, she gets sick, vomits, and I think she had like a low grade temp. And of course, obviously, with COVID being COVID, what it is, even though again, vomiting, GI complaints is an issue and something you have to be worried about. Not necessarily, it doesn't race to the top, but in kids, the way it represents in kids is varies. And again, I'll tell you right now, because I am an internist, I deal with folks 18 and above. I leave the pediatric expertise to those folks. Maybe now that I think about it, I'll probably get a pediatrician to come on the show to kind of talk about COVID from a pediatric standpoint, but that said the least. So, like at the school, they say, "Hey, do you want to, test your daughter for COVID?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." It's like, "Yeah, go ahead." Didn't really think anything of it because obviously, especially when we talk about the adults, this was kind of her first episode. I think she just had like a bad luncheon and boom, she vomited. And lo and behold, I get the call maybe an hour or so later, boom, my daughter has COVID, right? So of course that's like, oh, all right, that's interesting, right? Like to the point where, and again, this is what I've talked about this ad nauseum, right? Like the act of being COVID positive wasn't really like a, it was like more of a blah to me. My more concern was, okay, if she's positive, I wonder what it's like for like the rest of the family, right? So, kind of moving forward, it was kind of this kind of family gather around session because at the time, again, she's the only one who has any illness whatsoever, right? And she's positive. And of course, we live in a house, right? We're together, obviously, for a lot of the time, right? So you got to see, like, all right, what about the rest of the family? So we take our trip, down to our local pharmacy, and everybody gets tested, right? Because we want to see, because we know there's certain restrictions and things that are going to have to occur regardless of the testing diagnosis. We know there's certain things that are going to have to happen regardless of a testing diagnosis. And what I'm working on trying to get, Maria to either come on a podcast or I'm gonna jump on her podcast, to kind of like, that way we can kind of hear her point of view as well. Because her point of view is actually very interesting, especially coming from someone outside of medicine, someone who does not take care of patients with COVID, right? And then you get the diagnosis, like, oh my God, I'm COVID positive. So I definitely want you guys to kind of hear and her experience. So like I said, we may either do an episode here or I'm gonna do an episode on her podcast to kind of give her point of view, right? Especially for the aspect of my daughter coming out with COVID and how to deal with that, especially from a school related standpoint. But fast forward, so we take the whole family gets goes to the local pharmacy, get tested. And one by one, like everyone is popping up positive. You're positive. Like almost every, and I have to preface this, almost every single person comes back positive for COVID except me, right? So of course, again, this whole time, no symptoms whatsoever for really anybody in the family outside of my daughter having this kind of like stomach illness. Maria was tired earlier in the week. But really wasn't anything that I would have wrote home about because she's always saying she's tired, right? Just is what it is. So we're dealing with my daughter who has a stomach bug. She gets over that in less than 24 hours. So in less than 24 hours, she's back eating. But 24 hours later, we have this diagnosis where that out of the party of 5, 4 out of said 5 are COVID positive in one big house. And this was the issue, right? Especially when we talk about the aspect of social distancing, right? Because again, you hear me say this a lot: social distance. But what happens when you're at the point where you can't really social distance? Like you are literally in, and again, we have like a 2-story house. It's pretty nice size. So we have enough place where if with people needed to be at their certain corners, that could be done. But of course, this obviously the empathetic person in myself is thinking like, wow, like, yeah, I'm fortunate enough, right? That again, I live in a place where I have that ability, right, to be able to go to our separate corners. Like I'm fortunate enough. But what about all of the families out there who don't have that ability, right? What about all of the families who don't have the ability to say like, hey, you go to that corner over there, you go to that corner, and we just try to like avoid each other's, little like personal space, right? And I think that's probably the toughest thing about COVID-19 and the reality with COVID-19, because in a public area, right, it's so easy to social distance when we're, going to the grocery store, going to the pharmacy, just going out, maybe to like have some recreational event. It's very easy to be able to, again, get your space. But what do you do for the families that don't have that opportunity when it's time to come back home? So again, like I said, I am almost in a middle of a minefield, being the only person who is COVID negative, and dealing with just the fact that the family has COVID. Now, fortunately, again, this is why I stress the importance of vaccinations, because every single one of the family in Party of Five is vaccinated. And I truly believe that's likely the reason why when we talk about symptomatology, the worst we had was one of the kids having a stomach virus, and Maria ended up having some like upper respiratory like congestion and fatigue at one point. I think her taste went off and on, which is kind of weird. That's why I kind of like I thought I think it's more due to congestion. But like I said, when we get on her podcast or she gets on mine, that we'll delve into those types of questions a little bit deeper. But here we are, right? We have a whole family that, fortunately for the whole family, not only are the kids vaccinated, but the parents are vaccinated. The parents are boosted, and again, you just have it where we're positive, like whoop-de-doo, like, and that was what I was trying to, especially because I had to. I probably can go back to the state of shock when I talk about Maria, because and Medicine Monday crew, Lunch and Learn community understand that even though I come out here on Medicine Mondays, I talk on Real Physician Reacts, I may write a blog post, even though I may say all those things, you best believe that I still had to answer a lot of very common questions that I've been talking about here for the past 2 years once the diagnosis hit close to home, right? So which goes to show you how much Maria listens to me, especially from a content related standpoint. But kind of going back to this reality of social distancing. So again, we have to spend, and it's different, right? And I want to kind of, make sure we hit the divide, right? Like it's different, right? When we talk about the aspect of, quarantine and going back to school, right? So again, if you're listening to this episode, when this episode drops, you would have noticed, especially for my Instagram followers, that we haven't done one of those stairway videos that I like to do on my Instagram. If you're not following my Instagram, you should definitely follow me on my Instagram at Dr. Barry Pierre. And we used to do it every morning, but the kids have had to be out of school, right? And I think that's one thing that I really want to hit home that I didn't even realize, but now I do, because the opportunity is in front of me. Obviously having not one kid, not two kids, but three kids positive for COVID, says that like, all right, yeah, they got to be quarantined. Obviously they can't go to school. But what's interesting is that the recommendations, especially from a school related standpoint, don't even account for when the child happens to be vaccinated. I thought it was actually very interesting because obviously from my standpoint, especially me being negative for COVID and vaccinated and boost, I knew that I didn't have to quarantine, right? It was just wear your mask outside and protect yourself at all costs, right? I didn't even have to quarantine, right? You don't have to do that for 5 days. But for the kids, there is no, if the kids happen to be vaccinated, they could, they only have to spend 5 days. Like, everyone, right? If because they're COVID positive, boom, you got your 10 days. And fortunately, especially shout out to Diamond View, the teachers sent all of their homework. So it was definitely, because we definitely didn't want to have an issue where your kids miss almost 2 weeks of school. And again, because obviously within those 10 days, it included the weekends, right? Fortunately. So, you didn't want to have an instance where your kids are missing all this time in school and then falling behind in their school work, right? But again, it hit me, right? Like how is it that other families can do so, right? Like are other families, maybe they don't have that ability, right, to go and pick up the homework for the next couple of weeks, right? And that's where I understand that when we talk about, kind of where I'm at and, the education I do, I always talk and with the understanding, right, that I am talking from, a position of privilege, right? I'm talking from a position where I can tell, hey, kids, everyone go to their individual rooms and, mommy's going to be downstairs, papa's going to be upstairs, right? Like I can do that. right? I have the privilege of understanding, especially I'm here in the United States. I have the privilege of being able to say, like, yes, all the family is vaccinated. Both parents are vaccinated plus boosted, right? Those are privileges that occur. And I think we really have to be mindful, because I get this question a lot, especially when we talk about the end, right? When is the end? When is it going to get close to normal? When is that going to happen? We have to understand that things like this happen, like our situation happen to families across the country, right? And across the country, kids are having to sit out for a certain number of days across the country. Again, unfortunately, because Maria doesn't have to like go out to do work because she works from home. It's not a bother, right? Like there's not a step that occurs, right? Like imagine if you're a 2-parent household or 1-parent household and you end up having to go to work, and then all of a sudden your kids end up getting COVID positive, and then now you have to stay from work, right? Like these are just a lot of things that like we definitely had to reflect back on over the week. Now I can't tell you, it probably took 3 days before my kids were like, "Hey, we're gonna go back to school." Like they wanted to. I think they were tired of looking at me and Maria, right? Like they, especially Brooklyn. We love Brooklyn. They're like, "When can we go back to school?" They just could not wait to return to school, and we just had to let them know and educate them, like, "Hey, you can't go back to school now, right? You are positive for the coronavirus, right?" That's how they love to call it. They don't say no COVID-19. For them, it's the coronavirus. Malia says it's so cute. We had to let them know, hey, yeah, no, you're positive for the coronavirus. And because you're positive, there's a certain number of days you just have to stay out of school and you have to stay home with mommy and poppy, right? And they understood because, once they realized, okay, I don't got to go to school, I'm like, cool, I'll just live life amongst ourselves, right? So again, it was just one of those things where I definitely wanted to kind of hark on, this aspect of, kind of dealing with COVID-19 as a family, right? Because I think a lot of times, especially when we're providing content, a lot of content creators, a lot of people may feel like we're almost providing it from the outside looking in, right? Like we're saying these things and they sound nice, but in practical world, like it may not be as practical, right? Like again, I tell people all the time, when we think about the lockdowns, right? It's not practical to think that we can lock down every chance we get. Why? Because, people got to work. People got there's certain things that have to occur that people literally just can't afford to do. Right. So that's why we have to hark. Right. That's why we hark so much things that we know the general public can do. And because especially most of my colleagues, especially in regards to this kind of health content creation, because we understand, the importance of understanding what your patient may be going through, right? And understand that you may be your patient, right? Like you may be in that same scenario. And when you're in that scenario, how do you deal with it, right? I could tell you, this week and some change, again, has been pretty chill. And that's kind of the point, right? That's kind of the point when you're sitting in the middle of a pandemic, when you have a person in your family, like a person like me, who not only takes care of just sick patients, but goes into the line of fire, takes care of the sickest of the sickest with COVID, and has the opportunity to possibly bring it back, right? You have to protect yourself every step of the way. So again, I'm just fortunate enough and thankful, right, that we were able to, protect ourselves before, right, these positive, like, again, when I rewind back and say, man, if my daughter doesn't have an episode of vomiting at school, we likely don't test her for COVID, right? That's literally like the case where like we likely don't test her for COVID. If not for the fact that she had an episode of vomiting and happened to be at school and it was like a low grade, like those are things that just had to occur for us to get to this point. So again, by the time this episode comes out, I think we'll be, at least for the kids, right? The kids will be a few more days of quarantine or lockdown from going to school. And by the time certain clips of this episode, like they'll be back in school, and you'll know it because especially if you follow my Instagram, remember Instagram.com/Dr. Barry Pierre. if you follow it, you'll see that like I'll be posting back our daily morning routine of the staircase walkdown, right? So again, it is yours truly, Dr. Barry Pierre. Again, just kind of wanted to kind of give my thoughts on how we, the Pierre Party of 5, had to deal with COVID-19 as a family. That way you can kind of understand, like, all right, like I saw how they don't have to deal with it. And you know, maybe I can't be able to take all of the parts, but maybe I can take some of those parts and make it successful. And so y'all be blessed and y'all have a great day. And I'm gonna see you guys next week.